Perhaps in your group, private equity is a 4-letter word. Today's episode will challenge that. Take a listen. Welcome to Decision Points. I'm Doug Hudson.
I'm Scott Wood.
Welcome Todd Dauphinais, founder and managing partner of Clavis Capital. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah.
Great day here in Dallas.
It is. We got a little fall. We went straight to cold weather, right. And now here we are. Yeah. So, no, typically in Dallas, there is no fall or spring.
I will say we've had a little bit of a fall this year.
I know.
You know, it's been nice.
It hit quickly, I think 10 days or so ago. But, man, what are you up to? What's the family up to?
Knee deep in, all school activities and football.
Teenagers, we hear.
We got teenagers. So we still got a lot of stuff going on. Friday night football games. Basketball season is starting up. Hockey season is already in swing. So
do one of your boys play hocky?
My youngest plays hockey. I coach his hockey team. I play hockey. So
so you're not from Dallas?
I'm not, no.
Where are you from?
No. Originally born in Michigan.
Okay, yeah.
Hence the hockey. Yeah, my dad played. He was from New England, and so I picked it up early in life. I played most of my life, so I continue to. I'm an adult over a beer league kind of thing. But
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I often have said, like, if hockey was a thing in Dallas, which it was just when I was a kid, there was like one rink and one little league.
Yeah. Well, the Dallas Stars moved here probably when you and I were
out of college, right out of college. Yeah, Alicia's first job was with the Stars the first season they were here.
Oh, really?
So we were 22, 23 years old. But I remember there was one or two guys in my high school that played hockey, but it was one rink, one little bitty tiny league.
Yep.
No one played it. But like in hindsight, looking back, like that would have been a super fun sport to learn how to play.
Yeah, I think every wrestler in the South, if they live in the North, is a hockey player.
Yeah.
Because you were a wrestler.
The challenge would be the skating.
Right, but they grew up. Yeah. Todd grew up
you learn
just
it when
skating
you're young.
casually.
Yeah.
Right. You skated all your life, right?
Yeah, I think I started when I was 4.
Yeah.
4 or 5, somewhere around there.
So did you play hockey in college?
No. Texas A&M did not have a hockey
All right, we're going to have to come back to that.
Right. Yeah, we are. Because somehow you got from Michigan to A&M. Yeah. I'm not sure how that happened.
Right.
So you got one son playing playing hockey, sorry.
My youngest plays hockey. He's just starting to play basketball. That was the one sport I don't know anything about basketball.
And he's in what grade and what's his name?
He's Matthew. He is in 7th grade at Dallas Academy. And then my older son is a sophomore in the band at Highland Park. So all things high school football right now. We're in the playoffs now. So
playoffs Friday night.
Yep, Friday night. He played tennis for a long period of time and was really good at it, but just never really fell in love with it. The funny part is, well, my wife is the athlete of the family, but he, more than anybody else, was just born with a gift of hand-eye coordination.
Yeah.
And he's got the size. He's tall. He's got all that, but he was a great baseball player, just never fell in love with it.
Mm-hmm. He's a musician. That's what he loves.
Yep. So funny how kids are different.
Did either you or your wife play an instrument or musically inclined at all? Or
So I picked up a guitar during COVID, decided because we're all inside, I had to find something
Me too, but it sounds like you stuck with yours.
I stuck with mine, so now I have 9 guitars.
Oh, my
word. It's an expensive habit. Just kind of trying to teach myself how to play.
So if you are going to just go chill at the house, what's a go-to genre or song you're going to play?
It's all rhythm stuff. So it's Eagles, Tom Petty, that kind of stuff. The stuff that's relatively easy to play.
And on both, but certainly Tom Petty. Yeah. It's a good time.
Yeah.
Have you played in front of groups yet?
No.
It seems like a hard no right now. It seems like a hard no.
No, even my wife doesn't listen to me play.
Yeah. So you've mentioned a wife. What's her name? Where'd y'all meet? How'd you meet?
Yeah, so Kristen Dauphinais. So we've been married just 20 years now.
Congrats.
We met October 18th, 1998, Texas OU weekend, Friday night.
Texas OU weekend?
Yep.
Impressive.
Yep.
But you're an Aggie.
Yes.
So you were just there just to meet
I was just there. I'd been invited to a dinner of some friends, and she happened to be
it's
there.
okay to participate in Texas OU weekend, even if you didn't go to Texas or OU.
That's what a Baylor Bear says.
That's right.
Because they feel left out. They like pass Waco on their way.
In high school, I was headed to Texas. I was going to go to Texas I was all in on being a Longhorn.
Where'd you finish high school? You were raised in Michigan.
And then we moved down here the summer between 6th and 7th grade.
Already the most brutal year, I think, universally is 7th grade. Holy cow.
That impacted me a lot in a lot of ways.
Sounds like that was a decision point.
That was that was a bit of an inflection point there. So I grew up in a very kind of Midwestern, great neighborhood, Midwestern town with a bunch of kids on our street. And then we moved down here that summer between 6th grade, and so going from elementary school into junior high, and I got down here, and it was a whole different ball game.
And down here being Dallas,
Richardson. So Apollo Junior High, and at that point in time, so this is 1981. It was all about what you were wearing, and the clothes you had. I think it still is, right? But I remember distinctly at that point, parachute pants, Jordache jeans, polo was all with the colors turned up was all the rage, and
members only jacket.
Yep.
And there were only a few humans on this planet who could pull off parachute pants, and if you really weren't on video, you probably shouldn't have been wearing them. But we all tried.
That's right. So it was just a very different environment to fit into. I still to this day remember the first polo that I ever got. I bugged my mom for years, or for months or whatever, and she found one at TJ Maxx or something. It was a blue polo with a yellow polo, and I wore that, over and over again. So at that time, going through puberty, going into a new school, coming to this new place called Texas to try and figure all that out. We had Texas history, like you didn't have Michigan history in Michigan.
Same. I moved here from Florida, though they weren't teaching
Floridian history,
and we probably should have. St. Augustine, everything, but yeah.
And I was also the youngest. I went to school a year earlier than everybody. So I was the youngest in the class. So it was just a very difficult environment to kind of get my footing in. That really, I think, impacted me a lot, even through my high school years where you're just always the youngest, you're trying to fit in, you're trying to kind of find your way. And it took a little while to do that. So
did you play hockey when you moved down here, or did you only play when you were in Michigan?
No, I played when I was down here. The one rink you talked about, it was the rink that I played at. That was the first question when I still kind of vaguely remember.
Was it at the Galleria?
And it was on Arapahoe Road.
Yep. It was it was the North Texas, it's called the North Texas Ice Arena or something like that.
No way.
Up on,
little known fact, I dated a girl in middle school or maybe early high school who was a figure skater.
No.
And so I went to watch her at that rink, which is the only reason I knew that they played hockey there.
No way.
I don't remember her name, but that's
okay. Yeah. See, Alicia, he doesn't even remember her name.
Yeah.
For a while, they played actually at Prestonwood Mall.
The mall.
They played in the mall.
Yep, I remember that.
So, and that was the first question I asked when I think my mom and dad sat us down and said, we're moving to Texas. And, the first question is, do they have hockey there?
She was probably like, I have
no
idea.
Right.
When you moved here, though, the Stars were here?
No, not yet.
They weren't here. Yeah.
Not for several years.
So I'm guessing your dad moved for job.
Yeah. Kind of the great Sun Belt to Rust Belt.
And what was he doing?
He kind of was a lifelong human resources person. Yeah. So he was with Uniroyal in Michigan in the auto industry, and then came down here to work for, I think, Continental EMSCO. So it was kind of the auto to oil kind of migration at that point.
And did your mom work?
She did not. No, she she raised 3 boys.
Youngest, middle, oldest. You're the oldest. Yeah.
And did you go to Berkner?
I did.
Okay. Yeah. Alicia, my wife, likes to say all roads lead to Richardson. Like there's, a lot of people came out of Pierce and Berkner and Richardson. And,
at least you and Todd's roads lead back to Richardson.
That's right.
High school, what'd you do?
I played a little football, but I wasn't any good. I was a fullback. I have no speed and no real size, but I had, so I was first team tackling dummy for a little while. And then
that gets old.
Yeah, that got old real
quick. I was that guy too.
Yeah. I think I ended my career with -1 yards in regular games. So that wasn't for me. I did play hockey through high school, but it was club team, so it wasn't really part of the high school experience. So I ended up sort of in a weird space where I was never part of the popular crowd. but I wasn't offensive to anybody, right?
You were Switzerland.
If I wouldn't get invited to the good parties, but if somebody brought me along, it was okay. So
you were a no harm, no foul. You were right there.
Yeah. And I was a pretty naive, pretty innocent kid. But I also was still trying to find my way going back to the junior high experience. And again, going back to being the youngest in the class, you're kind of just a little bit in those formative years matters a lot. So high school was a challenging time. I think for everybody, it's a challenging time. I remember that, and it really sort of at the time I was kind of introverted, kind of very insecure, very self-conscious kid. Trying to find their way in this town, and it wasn't really until I went to college where some of that dissipated. Not all of it, but some of it. I kind of came out of my shell a little bit more when I went to college.
So tell us about that. You choose A&M, and why A&M, and then why did the collegiate experience start to help you kind of grow into a bit of who you are?
I mentioned I was going to go to Texas, and I was a B student. So and a lot of that I didn't try real hard. But I had my dad, I think, had arranged for me to go down and spend the weekend with his boss's son, who was living at Jester Hall on campus. I must have been 16 or 17.
Yeah.
I must have driven down there myself.
And this is to Austin.
Yep. And so I went there, and again, I'm pretty, pretty shy kid, at this point or whatever. And so I go to go down there to stay with this guy and his roommate. And I don't know if you've ever been to Jester Hall, but Jester Hall is like a frat house.
Yeah.
And it was loud, it was noisy, and then they wanted to show me a good time, so they took me down on 6th Street, and the freak flag was flying there, and then I think the two guys I was staying with, they got into a fist fight together, and it scared the living bejeebus. The whole experience just scared me. Yep. So I came back, and I was like, it was just too big for me.
Not for me.
So all you Longhorn fans, the old series Scared Straight, Todd kind of had the collegiate Scared Straight experience.
I'd never visited UT when I was looking at schools. I had a pretty simple, I was going to go to SMU.
Yep.
And then kind of at the last minute, I was like, why would I stay in Dallas? I'm going to get out of here and go all the way to Waco. whole 90.
Really stretched my experience. Right.
But I can remember the first couple of times I visited Austin, my roommate, my freshman year was from Austin. And so we went down a couple of times, and my experience was like yours. It was like, holy cow.
Wow.
And I would, if I'd gone to visit, I never would have opted in, because it was just,
it's overwhelming.
And I was kind of like you. I was just sort of simple, and I was not into the party scene and all that, and it kind of blew my hair back a little bit. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So then I had to go figure it out, and I was actually headed to Baylor. Baylor was kind of the next choice, and I ended up again. I think my dad arranged some kind of a visit, and I can still remember the exact time in which I decided to go to A&M, because I'm go down there and I'm walking around and everybody's saying howdy, which is corny and weird but friendly. And I had a map, and I can remember exactly where on campus I was standing. I was trying to figure out how to get to the Memorial Student Center, and this couple, this guy and girl, stopped and asked me, where are you trying to get to? And I told them, and then they walked me over there, and I was hooked at that point. It was just, that was more my speed, right? At that point in my life was more my speed, and I drank the Kool-Aid, right? I got fully in, and then I started.
And their Kool-Aid is very strong.
It is very strong. You're either in it or you're out.
Yeah.
And then I started getting involved in a lot of the student activities, and at the time, I thought you had to be in the Corps. You had to be in the military. I wasn't planning on doing that. but I was the president of my dorm, and I started to get into leadership positions in student council and bonfire and fish camp and all these other things. And that's really where I found my voice a little bit. I kind of came out of that shell.
Yep. What's the next 5-8 years? What are the first job or two that what's your degree in? And then what are those first job or two that you take out of A&M?
Yeah, so I got a finance degree and graduated in 91, which was one of the worst markets to graduate into. And so it took me about 6 months to, I think, find it. I was working as a bartender up at
Champs on Beltline.
No, they didn't have Champs. It was the North Dallas Athletic Club. It's actually making pretty good money. But, my first job was with an outfit called Marine Midland Business Loans, which is in the finance sector, owned by HSBC Bank. And so I was doing just credit analyst stuff. And so I was there for 9 months, and I took my first vacation. I went to go visit a friend, and I came back and found out the office had been closed.
No way.
Yeah, while I was on...
The office or business?
Business.
Okay.
They had relocated the business. So I'd been laid off while I was on vacation.
Wow.
So that was my first experience.
Yeah, a good corporate communication.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And then so I went to work for Bank One out in Arlington, and I was doing really well there. I was always a hard worker, so I was the first one in the bank in the morning. Which, if you're in the banking, that's not really that hard to beat. But I was the first one in. I was the last one out.
Yep.
I was a really hard worker. I was doing very well, and this is the next decision point or transition point for me was. So I go in for my annual review, and the president of the bank sits down next to me, and he's telling me all this. You're doing great, and you're really working hard, and everybody likes you, and you're going to be the next assistant vice president. That was my next thing, and they even gave me a portfolio of loans they had already been written off, so I couldn't screw them up, but. To work out and everything, and so I'm getting a lot of this praise, and I feel pretty good about what I'm doing pretty well, and I'm actually my boss had left, and so at 25 or 26, I was managing a team of like 3 analysts, so I was already in kind of a leadership position, and I felt really good about it. And the president of the bank tells me I'm doing great, and here's your raise, 1% raise. And I was making $18,500. And so it was at that point that I was like, banking just doesn't pay very well. Commercial banking does not pay very well. So, and that really threw me into a little bit of what am I really trying to do here? What do I want to do with my life? And that caused me to, on a whim, take the GMAT, and grad school seemed like a thing to go do. And so little did I know I was way late in the process. But I took the GMAT. I ended up doing pretty well at it. And all of a sudden that became, something to consider. So that was my first
I think
experience.
You start to mature a little bit, and you realize money is a bit of a qualifier, and you go, okay, this is not measuring up. Especially, again, I mean, my wife had a job right out of college. She was a flight attendant for a little while, but then she wanted to get into the corporate world, and she took a job at a real estate company, and she's like, I was miserable. She worked crazy long hours, made no money. And she's like, I literally should have bartended because I would have made more money and had better quality of life. Your 18.5 probably wasn't much more than you were making at North Dallas Athletic Club.
You're right. Yeah, I think so.
So transition then, now you go and you do grad school?
Now all of a sudden decide I'm going to go to grad school, but I'm way late in the process. And so I get rejected everywhere that I applied. Some of the places I had no business applying to. Everywhere was pretty much full. And so this was the spring of 95. I had always loved Notre Dame. Grew up watching Notre Dame football, and I had applied to Notre Dame. They had a 1-year program, which I was really attracted to, but they were full up. But they had one person drop.
Wow.
3 weeks before school is to start. And so with 3 weeks before grad school, having never stepped foot in South Bend, Indiana, never been there, didn't know anything about it, had to figure out, housing but I decided that was kind of felt like that's where God was putting me, and I was going to go to Notre Dame. And
Sounds like you weren't way late. You were right on time.
That's right.
Situation.
That's
so
awesome.
I showed up on campus, and 2 days later started grad school.
How'd you pay for it?
Loans.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to figure that process out too.
Yeah. What's that process and journey look like? How did that experience kind of shape who you are?
It was great. Notre Dame is a great place, and again, it's a Kool-Aid place, right? So I drank the Notre Dame Kool-Aid as well, and but it was an intensive year because it was a year program.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of complete your first year over the summer, and so it is a brutal summer. You live with these people that you're in class with, right? And so some of my best friendships I still maintain to today. We have a group that gets together once a year for a baseball game every year and has done so since graduation. So it was great. It's a great experience. There's no place like South Bend, Indiana on a fall Saturday with football. Neither of my teams I want to talk too much about this year, but it was fun to be there. It's just such a great experience.
Are you married, or you get married afterwards?
No, I wasn't married at this point in time. No,
all right,
not even close.
Okay, so you finished Notre Dame. Keep us going. Where we go next?
Ended up working, getting a job with Deloitte here back in Dallas. So after a winter in South Bend, Indiana, I kind of decided I did not want to. Not a northern.
You were fully
guy.
Southern at that point. Yeah. You had left Michigan and Notre Dame.
That's right. That's right. And so Deloitte. I wanted to go into consulting, but most of the consulting firms didn't recruit at Notre Dame. And so on Christmas break, when I was back here visiting my family, I talked my way into an interview with the local Deloitte HR manager. I came in for the interview on a Saturday, which told you a little bit about what the environment was.
Yep.
And there was a group here in Dallas that was the group that did all of the power utility company merger and acquisition work.
Interesting.
Throughout the country. They were it. Everything kind of went through this shop. This was back in the day when you still wore ties and so on Saturday I go in and the guy I'm interviewing with has the suspenders and the two-tone collared shirts, and we were talking earlier about Gordon Gekko. This was it. And
cufflinks.
I fell for cufflinks and I fell for it. I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. And the only reason I got the job was the partner was a big Notre Dame fan. But what I learned about him that we'll talk about a little bit later that I brought forward in my own leadership style and journey was he didn't care so much about what school you went to or grades or anything like that. He was looking for grinders. He was looking for guys and girls, mostly guys at that point, who we're going to work Saturdays and Sundays and roll sleeves up and that. And it was not a very, touchy feely,
there was no work smarter.
There's no work-life balance.
Yeah. It's work hard. That was the measuring stick.
And, from there, people talk about working 100-hour work weeks. We did. And routinely we would leave the office at 2-3 o'clock in the morning. We'd be back the next morning at 8 or 9. Saturdays were generally required. Sundays, if the Cowboys were playing, we get a little reprieve.
How long did you do that?
7 years.
And what do you take away from that? How did that shape you and how you invest and what you look for? How does that experience start to really shape who you are?
It was a fantastic experience. Learn to work hard, number one. And the thing about consulting, and I love... We hire a lot of people out of consulting. And the thing that consulting really teaches you, more so than investment banking does, I think, is it teaches you I got put into so many positions where I had to stand up in front of a boardroom and make a presentation to people who were much, older than I was. I was responsible for, merging teams together of people who had worked at a power utility for all their careers who were twice my age. It just forces you to do some things on your feet and think on your feet and present and think strategically and put together a good PowerPoint. And it's not the PowerPoint itself; it's the story behind the PowerPoint and all the preparation that goes into that. That's really what shaped me. And then just working hard. I mean, traveling a lot, working hard. but it was a fun time. It was.
Are you constantly feeling like you're in an uncomfortable position? Because I also think about generally consulting in the background. You're getting so many reps and so many different experiences. Are you having the feeling, Todd, I'm uncomfortable, and we generally want to run away from uncomfortableness, but often it's what makes us grow.
Yeah.
Are you feeling that at all? Do you remember?
100%. Yeah. I remember one specific incident where it was the president and CFO of a power utility, and my partner had come in, and he was supposed to do the presentation. And there was this one piece of the presentation, I think it was about the IT systems that I didn't know anything about. And so he's doing the presentation, then he turns the IT piece over to me. Fortunately, what I remember about that is the conference room where we were, lunch had just come, and I looked over, and luckily the CEO and the CFO were looking down at their lunch. And my partner saw the fear in my eyes. So he took it back. He taught me always be prepared for whatever's, never walk into a room without knowing exactly what's going to happen there. And I've taken that with me in my career, and I've taught, my team that same thing, is you always know what's going to happen and be prepared when you walk into the room. And during that time, I had met my wife, which was another inflection point, right?
Yep. Texas OU weekends, so good things come from it.
Yeah. And actually, to tell you the honest truth, the inflection point happened later, because we dated for 5 years before we got married, and somewhere in that process we'd broken up.
Maybe because you were working 100 hours a week.
It was that. It was I still wasn't quite ready to settle down or whatever, and so we broke up for a brief period of time. And I was at a Stars game with a friend of mine, and I saw her on a date. And not only did I see her, she walked down the aisle, and she's in better seats than I'm in, and she's on a date. So
you're like, this is a problem.
This is a problem. That's another inflection point. I need to make more than 18.5 to get those seats right there.
That's right. So anyways, we got back together and ultimately got married. A lot happened at the same time. We got married, and immediately, right before we got married, I had decided to leave Deloitte. 7 years of living out of a suitcase was enough. And I had taken a job with Rockwell Automation up in Milwaukee, but we were going to move to Chicago, and I was going to commute. And so we got married, and 3 weeks after our honeymoon, packed up and moved to Chicago.
How'd that go?
It ended up being fantastic. But
is your wife from here?
No, she's from Cleveland, Ohio originally, but she'd moved around a lot.
Okay.
And she went to college at Trinity down in San Antonio.
Okay.
So she considers Texas home.
Yeah.
But we were ready for a new adventure. Yeah. And the deal that I had cut with the guy with my boss at Rockwell was I could live in Chicago and commute to Milwaukee.
Okay.
And it was a great deal. And my wife could transfer to Chicago. And 3 weeks after I started at Rockwell, that guy who I'd cut this deal with got canned. New guy comes in. New guy is, tried and true Milwaukee, Wisconsin. There's no time for commuting or this, remote working environment. And the whole strategy I was hired to go do, which was to buy and build their service business, they were scrapping that, and now we were going into kind of cost-cutting mode. So now I have an apartment in Milwaukee. My new bride is in Chicago, and I'm miserable.
Yep.
And but I gutted it out for 18 months, and then ultimately found a job with a company called Schneider Electric, which is Schneider is a large utility equipment manufacturer and energy service business headquartered in Paris, France, but their North American headquarters is in Chicago, and they were looking for a corporate development person. And so the stars kind of aligned. Mm-hmm. I think I was about to get fired at Rockwell anyways, because I was miserable. I wasn't doing a very good job. I was supposed to be a strategy guy in a business that I didn't really know a lot about. So I survived and got out of there by my teeth and moved back to Chicago.
I want to keep going, because when do you build Clavis Capital? Is that after this experience, or is there something in between there?
Oh yeah, there's a couple jobs down the road.
Okay.
So I had I sort of ran the corporate development department for Schneider Electric in North America for 4 or 5 years. Developed a reputation for being able to buy companies effectively and merge them into the Schneider portfolio.
Interesting.
And then I had been offered, I'd gotten on the radar of the corporate folks in Paris, and I had been offered a position to do an expat assignment over in Paris. And so I brought my wife over there. We didn't have kids at the time. And so, we go to Paris in the springtime and it's beautiful, and, we're going to live in
effective
France
time to
all of that. And so the next inflection point was my CEO had come by my office at one point, and he had to be on the West Coast, and he said, well, why don't you come with me? I want to see some of these companies that we've acquired.
Yep.
So somewhere over the Western U.S., I end up in a conversation with Dave, the CEO, and I asked his opinion. I said, should I take this job in Paris? And he says, well, it's always good to get international experience, but if you want true P&L CEO kind of experience, I've got a different offer for you. And there was an orphan company that Schneider Electric had acquired years and years ago. And he said, I need somebody to go out there and go run it and go figure out what to do with it. And so it was based in Salt Lake City, Utah. And so I had to convince my wife not to move to Paris.
So you're a heck of a negotiator.
Move to Salt Lake City, Utah. That was a huge transition point for me. It got me into the CEO Club, which also got me into organizations like YPO, which is where I met Scott actually. And that's such a unique organization. But it got me into a different leadership role. And being the P&L leader of a organization is a whole different ballgame. And so
why?
You're responsible for a lot of people's lives and livelihood. And, you now have a lot of different stakeholders. You've got a board, you've got employees, you've got a leadership team, and you've got no peer in your organization. And particularly if you were now in Utah where you don't you don't have a whole
your network
support system, it's a lonely place to be. But you learn a lot. You learn so much you learn about culture, you learn about people, you learn about what motivates people, you learn that money isn't the only thing that motivates people. And particularly in an environment like Utah, which was so interesting because there's such a strong church and faith culture out there. That, I remember trying to get people to work overtime. Ain't going to do it. They're just not going to, because in that community, work is just has a different place in their.
It's not number one.
It's not number one, and that's such an interesting place to live and to manage a company and to lead a company. So
should work be number one?
It depends on the person. I mean, it shouldn't, but it also, if you're intellectually honest, if you have an organization that you've birthed and you've started, like I have, like you guys have, it becomes part of you. So you can't really necessarily separate out your work from the rest of your life. Your work and your life sort of mesh. So for some people that's the case. For others, it's a means to an ends. For some, it's just a paycheck. But it just depends.
How long do you run that company?
So I run that company for 4 years, and then go and make the recommendation to the board to merge that company with another entity. And I had agreed to stay on to affect that merger, but I made it clear I wasn't going to go back into a big corporate. I didn't have any interest in that. They convinced me, Schneider Electric convinced me, they presented me with another opportunity, which was to start and run their corporate venture business, which they had a corporate venture outfit in Paris, and they wanted to extend that to Silicon Valley. And so, and they were looking for somebody to go do that. At the time, that sounded interesting. I didn't know a whole lot about venture capital, but, it was sexy and it was cool, and, go spend time in Silicon Valley.
What year is this?
It out. So this is 2000. 10. And at this point, we had 2 kids in Utah, so that's the other inflection point. Becoming a father is obviously is huge.
Were they born in Salt Lake?
They were born in Salt Lake City.
Yep. So when you moved, what age were they?
Well, we didn't move. So I commuted from Utah to Silicon Valley. That was unsustainable, which I knew was unsustainable, but I wasn't that terribly interested in living in Northern California. And so I commuted for a year and a half.
Yep.
And then eventually we wanted to get back to Texas. Really, my wife was like, you're in San Francisco all the time or Paris, and I'm here with these 2 kids in Utah. And, and we didn't really have any reason to be there any longer. That wasn't my long-term solution there. I wasn't a venture capital guy. I had a blast. It was fun. But it just was, it's a different world. And so we moved back to Texas and then a series of things happened where my relationship with my 3 partners who were French guys living in Paris, officing next to each other in Paris, and me in the US just deteriorated. And we just had a different way of viewing things. And then there was a specific incident where it really deteriorated, where my partners on a business that I had committed to, that we would continue to fund, they had a different viewpoint, and that put actually me in some legal, as a member of a board of directors, and in some legal potential legal issues. And I remember very distinctly, I had made the decision I was going to go to the head partner guy, and I was going to have sort of the man-to-man conversation and say, look, this isn't working. It's, I know what we both know this. So why don't we take 6 months, and I will get us set up here in the U.S., but I'm going to go find something else to do. And he agreed with me on every aspect except for the 6 months part. And he kind of said, I think you should be gone by the end of the day.
End of the day. At
43 years old with 2 young kids, a new mortgage, and I'm out of a job all of a sudden. And, I ended up fighting that. We got into a little bit of a spat there, but at the end of the day, I had to go figure out and we had just moved back to Texas.
Yeah. So you are moved back here now. Yep. Okay. 43, wife, 2 kids.
Yep. No
income.
Right.
Out of the fire.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was panic. Yeah. Yes. And it was 10 years ago right now. Right. It was October is when 10 years ago was when it really started to go downhill. And so a period from October, late September through the fall in 2003 or 2013, I was just trying to figure out what I was going to do. I interviewed with a lot of private equity firms here in town. Tried to get a private equity job because that sounded like, with my background, what made the most sense. Mm-hmm. But what I learned through that process was I didn't come up through investment banking, and as a result, a lot of the people I talked to, they didn't know what box to put me in. Mm-hmm. I didn't fit the normal box, and so. A friend of ours, a mutual friend of Scott and I, Sonny Vanderbeek over at Satori Capital, kind of was the one that said to me, why are you looking to go join somebody else's firm? Why don't you just go start your own? And so after giving it some thought, that's what I decided to do. I just didn't fit. I didn't fit anywhere else, so I was going to create my own box.
Kristen, very successful in her own right.
Right.
And working pretty much the whole way through?
Yeah.
Doing what?
There's no way I could have done or started what I've started if she wasn't a successful executive in her own right. So because of that, I was able to start something up. So we had, and you don't think about it until you have to go do it, but just things like having benefits, but having some kind of income come in. Yeah. And Kristen spent all of her career in the insurance and risk management space.
Okay.
And then she got to the point where she was kind of the head of the cybersecurity insurance business for an insurance company here in town, or not here in town, but she was here in town. And so she was already, kind of running the gun, And that allowed me the time and the space and the ability to go start my own thing, because what they never teach you when you go start your own business is, you're the last one to get paid for a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm glad I didn't know all of the things that I know now, because I'm not sure I would have done it. I don't know if you feel the same.
Well, that's a common theme that we hear on this podcast, and I've experienced that too. And
we think we want to know what's around every corner, and we would just quit. We would just fall down.
There's no way. It takes twice as long. It's twice as hard. I went back. I didn't really pay myself for 4 years. I went back. At one point, I did an analysis. I think I paid myself $65,000 a year for 4 years. Because as you grow, as you know, you need to hire other people in order to scale. And then all of a sudden, you need office space, and you need all of those kind of things. So if I didn't have Kristen's support, number one, just as a life partner, but just her also the ability to kind of give me the time to mature this the way that I wanted to and the way that I knew I could, it wouldn't have been possible.
So you started out with Clavis Capital, and what was the original idea? And and the thought process, the thesis for the business.
Yeah, and that's probably the thing I'm most proud of, is that original vision still survives today. And really, as I look back 10 years, it'll be our 10-year, 1/1 of 2024 will be our 10-year anniversary.
Congrats.
And the vision that I had when I started this out is the same vision, and we've executed on it. I really wanted to be the antithesis of your typical private equity firm.
Right.
Is really... And some of that comes from sort of the being rejected, frankly, and looking at a lot of people, and there's nothing wrong with those backgrounds, but a lot of people that spent a majority of their career in investment banking or financial modeling or financial services. And I wanted to kind of create the antithesis of that, of a team of people who had operations backgrounds, consulting backgrounds, strategy backgrounds, operations backgrounds. And I had the inkling at the time that if I were sitting across the table from a business owner who was considering selling his business, that message would resonate, that I would have a little bit of a leg up on my competition, so to speak, because I'd sat in that seat before. And I found that to be true. And so I wanted to build a team of people who had that kind of mentality, and really even more so, the roll up your sleeves, the real grit and scrappiness background, which is really what I kind of grew up with. I've never been the smartest guy in the room. I never went to the greatest schools and had the greatest GPA, but I worked hard, and that's something that I always knew how to do. And the team that now is at Clavis have the same ethos and the same.
How many employees do you guys have today?
So we have 5.
5? Yeah. How many deals have you done to date?
So we've done about 16, kind of eight platforms, and then some add-ons to that.
And you've gone full cycle on a couple.
Yeah, a couple of them.
Of the
and
8.
We're just now getting to that point where we're, hopefully, knock on wood, COVID screwed everybody up, from a timing standpoint for a couple of years, where the world sort of stopped for 12 months and then everything got pushed back. Going back to that, I'm glad I didn't know what I didn't know, because it just takes longer. We're still in it, and I was thinking a lot about getting ready for this, and I've seen some of the other people that you've had there, and you've got this interesting mix of some people have gone all the way through, whether it's an exit of their company or sale of their company or on to that next stage of their life, or their kids are off in college or whatever. I'm still in it. I've got teenagers. We're still. I'm still building, and sometimes, some days that's really discouraging, frankly. But it's a bit of a labor of love.
Well, and the other thing is, if you've listened to some of them, when you talk, we have the 4 pillars kind of a pre-transaction planning. One of them is the coaching side around purpose. And I think your comment there, Todd, the myth is, when I sell it, he or she's got X amount in the bank and life is just rosy. No, you got to wake up every day and figure out what you're going to be a part of for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about that at the moment. but it is a good time for you to be thinking about life outside of it. You got to start that today, not once you sell it. I want to drive in on ripple investing.
Yes.
Did you come up with that?
I did. Yeah.
What and why?
So actually that relates to what you were just referring to. So you do get to an age, you can kind of see a goal line, right? Yep. At some point in the not too distant future, my kids are going to be off on their own and out of college. And we're starting to get to the point where we're going to start selling some of our investments. And I've got a great team. They're really good. And I've started a couple years ago building not only the infrastructure, but really trying to give the other folks on my team more and more responsibility. So I'm no longer the dependency. And a lot of that is thinking about what's that next stage. And so a couple of years ago, my wife and I set up a foundation or a group called the Clavis Impact Fund. And the idea really of that, and that today doesn't do a lot other than philanthropic stuff. It's really just what we use to support some local charities and things. But there's an idea behind that eventually will take hold, which is using the goods of business and my business background and all of the good things that capitalism does for the greater good. The idea behind that is ripple investing, where getting out of just, you can write the check to United Way or whomever, and that's great, and they do great work. But how are you targeted where your impact, whether that's dollar impact or time or attention or talent, can have a ripple impact on more than just one life, right? And how does that ripple into other people's lives? How do you positively impact other people's lives? So there's a vision behind what that will be. Mm-hmm. It's not that yet, but we've already started the wheels in motion to turn that into a force for greater good. And that's my next act, right? When I get this act kind of to the point where I can move into something different, and the team there is doing it better than I can ever do it. And my wife and I kind of have that next thing of what's our purpose? Yep. What's our next purpose?
Yep. Why do you choose not to invest in a company?
Lots of reasons. There's always a lot of red flags. A lot comes down to just gut feel. It's the person across from you. We had one situation, a really great company where just on paper and everything about it was great. And as we walked around the plant with the CEO, what we noticed was people were avoiding this guy. They didn't want to be, and once one, I can't remember it, I don't think it was me that picked up on this. Somebody on my team did and pointed it out. And so then you look for it. And as we walked further and further and further, realized people were, avoiding this guy. That told you something that, this was a guy that you didn't want to be in business with.
So what I heard you say there is a couple of things. All the financials, fantastic.
Yeah.
Your red flag was what?
There was something about the guy, yep. the leader of the business that certainly didn't sit well with his employees. And I'm convinced if we had spent more time with him, we would have found out what that was. But that told us everything we needed to know.
Sure.
This is all a people business at the end of the day, and we've done that wrong before. I have invested with people who were the wrong people, and those outcomes aren't good. They never are.
What's another red flag?
We look for the same things that everybody else does. If there's some kind of if there's a binary issue, a customer concert, 70% of your business is with one customer, or if a legal issue happens and doesn't go your way. So there's all of those things. That's the same thing everybody else does. We have to be able to articulate to ourselves first and to our investors second, what is it about this investment that is unique, and what is the inflection point that we are investing into? And if we can't do that clearly, then it's not so much that it's a red flag that there's something that just, we didn't like. It's just not for us. Because if if I can't stand up in front of my investor and say, we're investing in this company for this reason, it's very clear, then I have no business risking their money on that. So it's a combination of a lot of things. It's the people thing, it's the dynamics, it's the industry. Is it something that that has tailwinds or headwinds and all of those kind of things. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, can we articulate it? And importantly, over the last couple of years, does all of my team feel that way? Because if they don't, then I shouldn't do the deal. And we've had at least one situation, but other situations. We had one situation where I wanted to do the deal, and my two key lieutenants didn't, and we didn't do the deal. And at the end of the day, it really wasn't because the deal wasn't good. I think the deal was good. A friend of mine invested in it, and they're going to do fine. But my two guys didn't want to do it.
Yeah, you want everybody on the same page.
You got to have everybody on the same page.
So I'm a business owner, and I am going to market my business, and we're going to be talking to people like you who are looking to buy the business. What do I need to do to show up where you and your team are like, oh my gosh, this is center of the bullseye. Let's go.
Yeah. It's a great question. I'm sure, you spend a lot of time with business owners too. So the first thing is you got to be thinking about this somewhere between 3 to 5 years before you're going to do it.
Get ahead of the game.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. We say that often.
Yep.
So
you really do,
it's
because
good to hear that validated.
There's so much that goes into it. It's such an emotional thing, and there's so much that you've got to get set up, just on the financial side, but on the business side. And if you put real thought into what does my business need to look like, and put all of those things in place, that shows up when people like me show up. So if you have, whether it's audited financials or very clean processes, you've built a management team, people other than just you. That's that's the key thing that we run into so much. And back to the red flag is there's so many of these businesses, they're great businesses, but they're dependent on one person.
Yeah.
And when that person leaves, and there's always that problem, if I go into a transaction with you and you're going to get millions of dollars in your account, how motivated are you really going to be?
Right.
Now, you can mitigate some of that of you've got to, roll over, invest in the deal, but that only goes so far. And so has the business owner taken the time to go through all of those things to make sure that the picture is as pretty as it can get?
Yeah.
And you can tell that pretty quickly. They also have to have a clear reason. Why are you doing this? And that's always the interesting conversation because most of the time it's for money, right? They built something and there's an exit and there's, some kind of a liquidity event. And that's fine. That can be fine. The ones that are really unique to me and the ones that we end up investing in really have a vision of where this can go to the next level.
Right.
And they can clearly articulate that. And they can clearly articulate why they can't do that themselves or why they need help doing that. Yeah. Those are the people that we get most interested in and most excited about.
Or that founder owner wants to stay, he or she wants to stay, but they've come to a spot they can't get from A to Z. They need help.
Yeah.
That's your all's bullseye. You all like to.
And I love it when an owner, does when we are able to have a very frank conversation and the owner can articulate that. And the owner also says, look, I've got 3 years left, but I want to be out in 3 years. I'd rather have that conversation up front.
Absolutely.
Because
Correct.
I can work around that.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so then the conversation I have with that owner is different over the next 3 years, which is more, it's how do we achieve this, but it's also how do I get you out of the seat? And how do you and I together get you out of the seat and make sure that seat is occupied by the best management team that we can have?
We think in terms of pre-transaction planning, and we think of in terms of 4 pillars, 2 sort of business pillars and 2 personal pillars. And the 2 business pillars are really around valuation. Like how do we maximize the exit from a valuation perspective? But then also, how do we create a great business, good leadership team, good accountabilities, audited financials, the structure that makes a business really, really good. And then we have these 2 pillars that are really on the personal side, which is what am I going to do post-transaction?
Right.
And then all the wealth
Huge
planning
problem.
stuff that is kind of our bread and butter. And it's interesting that when you're looking, the way you answered the question, you of course went to the business pillars, which is I want to see a great business, a business that's well run, that's well organized, got a good leadership team. But I also want an owner who's kind of clear, which is more of personal work that the owner would need to do to understand what the next phase is for them too.
Yeah, the best owners are very comfortable in their own skin, and they understand, and they're mature in how they're looking at things post transaction, because it is this a lot with your clients. I mean, it's a hugely emotional thing
for sure,
and it's a big transition in life from being the guy or the girl to, okay, I've still got another 25 years of my life. What am all of a sudden I've got a partner, and selecting your partner is the biggest issue there. And I do think, you mentioned valuation, and I think a lot of times people worry too much about the number.
Yeah.
The number kind of will take care of itself. Yeah. And the really successful ones that I've seen aren't it. Look, if you're going to walk away and just go sit on the beach, then yes, go get the most money you possibly can. But most of the people, they really do care about who their partner is, certainly if they're still working in the business. And even if they're not, that's their family, that's their friends, that's their employees are their family, and they do care. I think people get a little too worked up over valuation. Yeah, if you're a good business, you're going to trade at a market multiple.
That's right.
If you leave a little bit on the table, so be it.
So let's back up 3 to 5 years before the transaction. You said that's, hey, if you're going to transact, you're thinking about it, you need to start that process 3 to 5 years out.
Yep.
What would be, 2 to 3 sort of big priorities that you would want to work on over that 3 to 5 year period of time so that you're ready to present and show up the way, the best way possible?
Having a very clearly articulated strategy, which honestly is a rarity. So, we tend to play in the lower part of what's called the lower middle market businesses. So we're generally interacting with companies that are anywhere from 20 million in revenue to, 100 million in revenue. Most of those businesses that have a strategy, it lives in the CEO's head or the management team's head. It's actually not on paper. So having that is part of painting that picture, in addition to all of the processes and all of the, whether it's audited financials or whatever, having a board of people that can help advise there. But the bigger thing really is, do you have an extended team of really talented people in each of these functions that don't share the same last name?
Right.
So the more you can look like a professional, institutional quality business, the better. Getting good financial advisors, having good people around you. Yeah. Everybody taught in our business, the catnip word is proprietary. It's, this is if you can find a deal where it's not a brokered deal or something like that. And there are benefits to that. But all of these your clients and the people that we buy from, they do this once in their life.
That's right.
Right? They're not professionals at this.
That's right.
And it is wildly intimidating if you don't live in this. The language is different, and you get attorneys involved in all of this stuff. You need, you need good, competent assistants, and that's where difference between assistance and competent assistance can be broad, but
and it's highly emotional.
Yep.
And so just having an advisor who can sit there and be objective and say, this is not something you want to get twisted around the axle on.
Yep.
Let that go.
Right.
Let's focus on this because this is material and this is important, but let's let that go.
Yeah. Well,
because otherwise, you get down the rabbit trail and you never make any progress.
That's right.
But that's so important. It's emotional because most people will do this once.
Yep.
It's less emotional if you do this 50 times in your lifetime.
Right. Yeah.
That's why there's this distinct disadvantage. And so getting the right help, yes, understanding maybe the fact that you are going to be emotional, just acknowledging that is probably going to be a big part of the process.
Well, and you don't get to the point where you're a business owner, and certainly if you're a founder, that's a certain type of person,
Yep.
right? And there's usually a lot of confidence, self-confidence about whatever the topic is that you're running the business. But now all of a sudden you're in an arena where you don't know.
You might try to bluff your way through it.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And you know that you don't know that.
Yeah.
And that type of a person who's used to running a company, being in that environment, is just very difficult.
Yep.
So
you've kind of, Todd, as we start to kind of, land the plane a little bit, be thinking, and how I want you to kind of close this today is, you got a room of 50 business owners out there. They're exactly in your target market,
Yep.
20 million to 100 million. When they leave the room, what's 1, 2, maybe 3, 4? What do they need to be asking themselves or focused on as they
go back to their day job?
Exactly.
Yeah. So the key questions are to get really, really, really clear on why you want to enter into a transaction. And what is it you're really trying to accomplish?
So good.
And getting beyond the immediate obvious answer, which is,
Money.
I want a liquidity event, or I want
Exactly.
money, or whatever. I want to take chips off the table. Because that's the easy stuff. It's really the people who have really thought through, here's what I want to do. Here's what I'm willing to do. And what I mean by that is, if you are going to take on a partner, and in most cases, you're going to be asked to leave money on the table and become a financial partner with somebody else. You damn well better really know that person.
Yep.
And do your due diligence on that, that firm or that person or whatever. Talk to their investors, their, other people that they've invested with. Do your homework on that. But really understand, what is it you're trying to accomplish? Yep. And make sure that you get comfortable that, I'm okay with having a partner. So that would be 1. 2 is, I would say, make sure that whatever you're putting in the bank, you're good with. Okay. The whatever you're leaving in, you got to look at as house money, right? And so that's what I would be advising people, and I have advised people on that. Is just make sure that you're comfortable with what, if you're, let's just use a number. If you're getting 100 million, but 80 million is staying with you, make sure that you've constructed your lifestyle that 80 million is
correct.
Okay. Usually 80 million is fine. But whatever amount that you're getting, that you're constructing your lifestyle around that. Otherwise, get 100% out.
Once again, it's a budget. Make sure whatever that is, make sure that you got a budget that matches that income, so to speak.
But, make sure you're really doing diligence on your partner, and make sure you're really comfortable. There's all kinds of horror stories out there. And frankly, the business owner's objectives and the financial partner's objectives are never 100% aligned.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
You got to try and get them aligned as much as you can, but they're never 100% aligned. And then getting really clear on, what is your next stage of life? What is it you want to go do? And what does that look like? And then the final thing is, what I've seen a lot is, you're always going to you've got all kinds of voices chirping in your ear. You've got your advisors, your tax people, your wealth management people, your attorneys, and then all of a sudden everybody wants a piece of you, right? And, at the end of the day, trust your own voice. And, in my case, it would be, I listen to my wife, and, I listen to everybody, but at the end of the day, it's my voice and my family's voice.
Yep.
And that's what really matters. Get the opinions of all of the people,
good.
But at the end of the day, it's your money and it's your life, and trust your own voice. If you've gotten to that point where somebody's going to write you a check, you're doing something right. You know what you're doing.
Todd, thank you. What I heard so clearly in there, and as you're listening or watching, really having the hard conversations on the why.
Yeah.
Is that really, and then being honest with that potential partners. Do I want out immediately? Do I really want to grow? Whatever that why is, be honest, be upfront, and have those hard conversations on the front end. and that'll help set the table for a much better partnership or exit, whatever that would look like.
That's right.
So
100%.
Todd, grateful for you. Thank you for joining us on Decision Points.